Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. How are you? I hope you would be fine. Students, I am here with a video that is related to forms of verbs. We have already discussed about verbs. I'll provide you the link in the description box. Go watch that video if you have not gone through it. And now we'll start about forms of verbs. Before starting our today's lesson, I'm going to tell you that there are two forms of verbs. That is, first is main verb that we are going to deal today, and the other one is auxiliary verb, that is the helping verb. Okay, so forms of verbs are going to be discussed about the main verbs, right? Students, you would have heard that there are 3 forms of verbs or 5 forms of verbs. So we are going to discuss what are basically 3 forms of verbs or what are 5 forms of verbs. Okay, actually there are 3 forms of verbs. Verb number 1, verb number 2, verb number 3. That is first form of verb, second form of verb, and third form of verb. Because there are 3 tenses, that is present, past, and future. Sometimes something happens now, something is happening now. Sometimes something happened in the past and some will happen in the future. Right? So we need to use present tense if something is happening now. We need to use past tense if we are telling about something that has happened in the past, and we are going to use some other form if something is going to happen in the future. Where do we need to use which form of verb? Will inshallah cover all these things in the video. Okay, the first form of verb is called its base form or root, right? Because this is the main form of verb. Then comes the verb number 2, that is simple past, and then verb number 3, it is past participle. First form of verb, second form of verb, and third form of verb. For example, the first form of verb is do. It's a verb. It's a main verb, right? To do something. The past tense of do is did, and the third form of verb is done. Base form, simple past, and past participle. Then comes the fourth form of verb and fifth form of verb. These are none the else, but if we add ing to the main form of verb, it becomes the present participle, that is the fourth form of verb. Right? All we need to do, we need to add ing. If we are making any continuous verb, that is a tense in which a verb is in continuous process and it has not ended, either it is in present, in past, or in future, we use this form of verb. That is first form of verb plus ing. It will give us present participle. Then comes the fifth form of verb, and that is simple present. And it is none the else, but what we need to do, we need to add s or es at the end of the main verb to make a fifth form of verb, that is simple present. Where do we need to use it? When the subject is third person singular, we need to use this form of verb. I hope, students, it's very clear to you that there are basically 3 forms of verb, but when we need to make a continuous verb, we need to use present participle and we add ing to make a fourth form of verb. And if we are using a verb with third person singular, it is called simple present form, that is the fifth form of verb. And what we need to do, we just add s or es at the end of a verb to make this fifth form of verb. Okay, now we'll move again to the 3 forms of verb. We are not going to deal with 5 form of verbs, but we are going to stuck to the 3 forms of verb. Why? Because these are our today's topic, right? Students, there are a number of forms of verb, right? So it is very difficult for us to learn all the forms of verbs, because everything that we perform as an action is a verb. So how can we learn all the forms of verbs, all the verbs and their forms? So we need to understand the tricks, the rules behind them to make it easier for us to learn at least most of the forms of the verbs. Before getting into it, we need to understand that there are 2 types of forms of verb: regular verbs and irregular verbs. Regular verbs are very much easy to learn. Why? Because we just need to add ed ed at the end of the main verb to make its second and third form. And at least 96 to 97% of the verbs that are covered are regular verbs. So we don't need to learn their forms of verbs because we just need to add ed at the end of them, right? It has certain rules. We're going to discuss them also in the video. So watch the video till the end and do not skip because I'm going to tell you some of the tips in between, right? So the problem of regular verbs is solved. Now we need to learn irregular verbs. What are irregular verbs? Irregular verbs are those verbs where we do not add ed at the end of the main verb. But what we do? We have to learn all three forms of irregular verbs. But my dear students, don't get worried that we need to learn them because they are very much less in number, right? So we can learn them. And I'm going to list out some of the verbs that we commonly use, that are used commonly in our daily routine. So we need to learn them. Most of them we use regularly and most of them are those that we have already learned. So don't get worried and just focus so you can learn. Okay, now we are going to discuss a list that we use commonly. But before that, let me tell you that we are dealing with the irregular verbs that have different forms in every form, right? Sometimes irregular verbs remains same. That is, the first form, second form and third form are the same. Like in cut, C-U-T, cut, cut, cut. All three forms of cut are same. So they do not change altogether. But sometimes what happens when we are dealing with irregular verbs, they just change their vowels. For example, begin, began, begun. So you see, we just changed their vowels. I changed into A in the past tense and into U in the past participle. That is begin, began, begun. Similarly, draw, drew, drawn. Similarly, come, came, come. So you see here O changed into A and again O. Right? So sometimes what happens? They just change their vowels. But the third category is where they changed them all together. Right? For example, bring, brought, brought. Buy, bought, bought. So we have to learn them. Just repeat with me and you will learn it in a few minutes. Okay? Begin, began, begun. Break, broke, broken. Bring, brought, brought. Buy, bought, bought. Buy means to give some cash and buy something in return. Bring means to get something from somewhere. It has a difference. We sometimes just mix them with each other. So these are two different verbs. Bring means to get something from somewhere. Buy means to get something by giving some cash in return, right? Build, built, built. Choose, choose, chosen. Come, came, come. Cut, cut, cut. Draw, drew, drawn. Drive, drove, driven. Fall, fell, fallen. Feel, felt, felt. Find, found, found. Get, got, gotten. Give, gave, given. Go, went, gone. Grow, grew, grown. Hear, heard, heard. Hold, held, held. Keep, kept, kept. Know, knew, known. Lead, led, led. Leave, left, left. Let, let, lie, lay, lain. Okay, this lie means not to say the truth. It is the opposite of truth, right? And lay sometimes is used as the first form of verb, which means to lay down, right? Let jana. Lose, lost, lost. Make, made, made. Mean, meant, meant. Meet, met, met. Pay, paid, paid. Put, put, put. Read, read, read. It has the same spelling in all three verbs, all three forms, but the word remains same, but the pronunciation is different. Read, read, read. Rise, rose, risen. Run, ran, run. Say, said, said. See, saw, seen. Send, sent, sent. Set, set, set. Show, showed, shown. Sit, sat, sat. Speak, spoke, spoken. Spend, spent, spent. Stand, stood, stood. Take, took, taken. Tell, told, told. Think, thought, thought. Understand, understood, understood. Wear, wore, worn. Write, wrote, written. Become, became, become. Bite, bit, biten, right? Bite means to cut something with your teeth. Bleed, bled, bled. Cost, cost, cost. Dig, dug, dug. Do, did, done. Drink, drank, drunk. Eat, ate, eaten. Feed, fed, fed. Fight, fought, fought. Hang, hung, hung. Have, had, had. Hide, hid, hidden. Forget, forgot, forgotten. Hurt, heard, heard. Lend, lent, lent. Ride, rode, ridden. Ring, rang, rung. Sell, sold, sold. Sleep, slept, slept. Swim, swam, swum. Teach, taught, taught. Win, won, won. Wake, woke, woken. Tear, tore, torn. Throw, threw, thrown. So my dear students, we have covered so many irregular verbs. You need to learn them. Watch the video again and again and learn them thoroughly. And now we are going to move towards the regular verbs, because there are 4 rules of making regular verbs, right? Every time we need to have ed at the end of a regular verbs, but there are some other rules also. Let us go through it. In most of the cases, what happens, we just need to add ed at the end of the main verb, right? So we just add ed in most cases. For example, help, helped, helped. Finish, finished, finished. Look, looked, looked. Walk, walked, walked. Similarly, some more. Accept, accepted, accepted. Act, acted, acted. Add, added, added. Believe, believed, believed. Call, called, called. Change, changed, changed. Charge, charged, charged. Dropped, dropped, dropped. Enjoyed, enjoyed, enjoyed. Exist, existed, existed. Fix, fixed, fixed. Need, needed, needed. Rust, rusted, rusted. Reflect, reflected, reflected. Serve, served, served. Save, saved, saved. Try, tried, tried. Work, worked, worked. Laugh, laughed, laughed. Watch, watched, watched. Jump, jumped, jumped. Shout, shouted, shouted. Talk, talked, talked. Smile, smiled, smiled. So my dear students, you would have noticed that we have added just ed at the end of all these regular verbs. So if I just point out some of them which are having certain other things. For example, here we have P at the end, but I have doubled this consonant, dropped. Similarly, we have already an E at the end of a main verb, so we added just D at the end. So these are some of the things that we need to discuss now. I have already told you that in most of the cases what we need to do, we just need to add ed at the end of the main verb. Rule number 2 is we need to add just D if the word ends in E already. If there is an E at the end of a main verb, all we need to do, we just need to add D at the end of the regular verbs. We are talking about regular verbs where we need to see just ed at the end of the second form of verb and third form of verb. So care, cared, cared. Bake, baked, baked. Live, lived, lived. Like, liked, liked. Right, students? I hope it's very much clear to you. Now move to rule number 3. Rule number 3 is to add IED when if a regular verb ends in a consonant and Y, take off the Y, right? Take off the Y and add IED. This I is in place of Y if the Y is after a consonant, not after a vowel. You have to focus here. If there is a consonant at the end of a word along with a Y, followed by a Y, that is, if at the end of a verb there is a consonant with a Y, what we need to do, we need to remove this Y, we need to put I in place of it, and then we have to add ed. For example, cry, cried. We removed Y after this R, we added I after it, and then we added ed. So you remember, if there is a consonant and then a Y, we need to add IED in place of this Y. Cry, cried. Fry, fried. Try, tried. Study, studied. Similarly, there are more marry, married, right? So if there is a consonant followed by a Y at the end of a verb, we need to remove the Y and then we need to add I and ed at the end of the verb, right? Cry, cried, cried. Fry, fried, fried. Try, tried, tried. Study, studied, studied, right? Now move to rule number 4, and if a regular verb ends in a single vowel and a single consonant, double the consonant and then add ed. What happens here? If a word has a vowel and a consonant at the end of a verb, what we need to do, we need to double this consonant. Stop, stopped. Drop, dropped. Flip, flipped. Skip, skipped. So you see, we have a vowel in each of these verbs, right? Followed by a consonant. So we are just doubling this consonant in the second and the third form. Stop, stopped. Drop, dropped. Flip, flipped. skip, skipped. यानी अगर हमारे पास किसी भी वर्ब के आखिर में एक वोवेल हो, वोवेल के बाद कॉन्सोनेंट होगा, तो हम जब उसकी सेकंड और थर्ड फॉर्म बनाएंगे तो उसमें हम इस कॉन्सोनेंट को डबल कर देंगे, ठीक है, और उसके बाद फिर हम ईडी लगा देंगे. नाउ लेट मी just conclude what I have taught you people in the today's video, right? सबसे पहले आपको ये बताया है कि वर्ब की एक्चुअली 3 फॉर्म्स ऑफ वर्ब होती हैं, ठीक है, जिसमें से फर्स्ट फॉर्म ऑफ वर्ब, सेकंड फॉर्म ऑफ वर्ब और थर्ड फॉर्म ऑफ वर्ब वो असली होती हैं, और उसके बाद जो फोर्थ और फिफ्थ फॉर्म ऑफ वर्ब होती है उसके अंदर क्या है कि फोर्थ फॉर्म में हम सिर्फ ing ऐड कर देते हैं और फिफ्थ फॉर्म के अंदर हम सिर्फ s या es ऐड कर देते हैं मेन वर्ब के अंदर, ठीक है. उसके बाद आपको बताया कि जो 3 फॉर्म्स ऑफ वर्ब होती हैं ये 2 तरह से डिवाइड कर दी गई हैं, एक रेगुलर वर्ब्स में और एक इर्रेगुलर वर्ब्स के अंदर. रेगुलर वर्ब्स वो होते हैं जिसमें सिर्फ मेन वर्ब के अंदर हम ed ऐड कर देते हैं, और इर्रेगुलर वर्ब्स वो होते हैं जहां पर या तो वर्ब तीनों फॉर्म्स में सेम रहते हैं, यहाँ पर या तो वो सिर्फ अपने वॉवेल्स को चेंज करते हैं और या फिर वो मुकम्मल तौर पर चेंज हो जाते हैं, ठीक है. रेगुलर वर्ब्स हमें याद करने की जरूरत नहीं होती, और रेगुलर वर्ब्स का फायदा ये है कि ज्यादातर जो वर्ब्स हैं वो रेगुलर हैं, यानी 96-97% इंग्लिश के अंदर जितने भी वर्ब्स हैं वो रेगुलर होते हैं, तो उसके हमें सेकंड और थर्ड फॉर्म को याद करने की जरूरत नहीं है, सिर्फ उसके हम रूल्स को याद रखेंगे तो हमारे लिए आसानी होगी. अलबत्ता इर्रेगुलर वर्ब्स हमें याद करने की जरूरत होती है, लेकिन इर्रेगुलर वर्ब्स बहुत थोड़े से हैं और कॉमनली यूज होते हैं, इसलिए उसको याद करना हमारे लिए आसान है, ठीक है. इसके बाद हमने आपको इर्रेगुलर वर्ब्स जो आमतौर पर इस्तेमाल होते हैं उसकी हमने एक लिस्ट आपको बता दी थी, ठीक है. वो आप बार बार देखिए, बार बार उसको सुनिए और याद कर लीजिए. और उसके बाद हमने आपको रेगुलर वर्ब्स के जो रूल्स हैं वो भी बता दिए कि ज्यादातर केसेस के अंदर सिंपली हमें ed ऐड कर देना होता है, और फिर कुछ केसेस ऐसे होते हैं कि जिसके आखिर में ऑलरेडी e होता है तो वहां पर हमें सिर्फ d ऐड कर देना होता है ताकि वो ed बन जाए. और रूल ये था कि अगर हमारे पास वर्ब के आखिर में एक कॉन्सोनेंट हो और उसके बाद y हो, तो हम जब उसको चेंज करते हैं सेकंड और थर्ड फॉर्म में तो y हटाकर उसकी जगह I लगाते हैं और फिर ed ऐड कर देते हैं. और फिर आपको रूल नंबर 4 बताया कि अगर एक वोवेल है और वोवेल के साथ कॉन्सोनेंट है तो फिर हम क्या करते हैं, सिर्फ कॉन्सोनेंट को डबल करके ed लगा देते हैं सेकंड और थर्ड फॉर्म को बनाने के लिए. I hope students you would have learned thoroughly about the 3 forms of verbs, and if you have any sort of questions, queries, any problems, you can ask me in the comment section. Please like the video, share it with your friends. Please subscribe to the channel if you are new to the channel. Stay tuned, stay blessed, take care. Allah Hafiz.